The armor burst apart, forming those strange windspren who flew into the air overhead before latching on to a figure hovering above. The plate had fit everyone, but him it matched. A brilliant knight radiant in glowing armor, holding aloft an intricate shard spear. Kaladin Stormblessed, bright as the sun. When I saw Kaladin in shard plate on the Kickstarter page, I was very excited because I thought it was such a cool model to see. However, I was really disappointed in the base that he was on. It just seemed like the base didn't really match the grandeur that he deserved, being who he is in the books. We all love Kaladin. He's such a great character. And so I wanted to give him a base that kind of matched how I felt about him as a character. I decided to make the base as close as possible to how I envisioned him at the end of Rhythm of War when he came back to Yurthiru and pushed out the Pursuer and all of his cronies. And so for that, I had kind of two main objectives. The first one is that I wanted him glowing in shard plate. And so see my previous video of how I painted the Kaladin model himself and got that glowing effect on the glyph on his chest. The second objective I had was that I wanted him hovering up high in the air because what's more cool than that than someone flying? So that's how I wanted him to look, but I also wanted to be able to play with him in a Warhammer Age of Sigmar army. I needed to match him with a model that had the rule set as well as also kind of looked like what I envisioned Kaladin would look like. And so I came across the Celestant Prime model. The rules for this model kind of match up with what I think Kaladin would do on the battlefield. In order to play him in Age of Sigmar, in Warhammer, I had to get the base size right. And so I used a 100mm base. And then I needed him to kind of match the Celestant Prime's height. So I needed him floating in the air. So the first step was to paint Kaladin. I kept the process very simple. I think I used 4 or 5 colors. The main aspect of the model I wanted to get right was the glow effect. For the base itself, I knew I wanted a Yurthiru aesthetic, and I kind of viewed Yurthiru as almost like a cathedral in that central atrium area. And I know there may not have been as many pillars in the middle of the cathedral, but I kind of viewed this as maybe there was a central little spire somewhere inside the atrium. And I wanted Kaladin to be on top of it and kind of descending down into Yurthiru. I decided to go with styrofoam. My brother actually for Christmas gave me I'm not sure what to call it other than a hot wand that can cut through styrofoam. It's built to do this kind of stuff. So awesome brother right there. Shout out to him. And with that, as well as with my hobby knife with a saw attachment, I wanted to have kind of a stepped layer up to the pillar itself. So I decided on 3 layers. And so I cut out circles from the styrofoam and then kind of got them at the size of a staircase for the size of model that we are working with. And it wasn't an exact fit. The thing with that hot stick as well as the hobby knife is that it wasn't getting exactly even cuts. And looking back, I probably should have just 3D printed something. I don't have a 3D printer yet. Hopefully I'll get one soon, but I was using the materials that I had access to. And so I did my best to make it symmetrical and the same size across the board. I decided to create the pillar by having separate pieces of it. So I had about 10 different circles that I was cutting out, and I chose the best ones to put together to create that pillar. Now with the base put together, I had used an X-Acto blade to kind of cut in and create the stone in between the stones, and then used a mechanical pencil to expand those gaps. And then I used green stuff to come in and cover in any of the gaps along the base of the different layers. Now for those of you who don't know, green stuff is a modeling putty. When you put the yellow with the blue, it creates green, and it's a chemical reaction of some kind, and you can mold it into what you need, and then over time it hardens. So within a couple hours it hardens and becomes part of the model. So I use this to fill in the gaps around the bases. Now for those of you who haven't used green stuff before, I highly recommend getting some if you have interest in doing any kind of modeling with your miniatures. I got this set off of Amazon. I got a tube of blue and a tube of yellow that are separate, and then I mix them together. You have water on your hands and you mix it together. You use a putty tool You put water on it, and then you kind of mold it into place. Now, I'll be the first to admit I'm not the best at green stuff. I just use it here and there to give me a little bit of customization. So at the end of getting the bases filled in, I had some extra green stuff, and if you have extra green stuff, you want to think of ways you can use it. I decided to make little stone rubble type things, maybe bricks of some kind that had fallen to the side, and I just added them as rubble. Because if you have extra green stuff, it's going to harden eventually, and so you might as well use it somehow. Okay, now onto the column itself, the pillar. I decided to go with I went with 3 full cylinders, and then I added a 4th on top of that. So I put the cylinders together, and I was able to cut around and cut down to kind of make it symmetrical as I could. Again, this is not a perfect science. I was trying to figure things out as I went. That is the joy of this hobby, is that you get to have fun as you learn different things about the materials you're using. So 3 cylinders together got me a good height that I wanted. And then I added some rubble on the base to make it more interesting. I cut up one of the cylinders and cut into it, made it some jaggedness, and put it onto the base as well. And I did this because I didn't just want a single pillar. I wanted some interesting things going on with the model. And so I added a 4th piece to the top of the pillar, and I carved out the center of it, made a little bit of rubble like it got shot by lightning and coming apart. Then, of course, I just used hot glue to glue the styrofoam together, and it worked out pretty well. At this stage, I added green stuff around the pillar. There's lots of little styrofoam pieces that were just hanging on to the column, and I didn't want to get those caught in a brush or anything like that as I painted it. So I wrapped the whole thing in green stuff to give it kind of a worn and textured look. So pro tip here, do not spray paint styrofoam. I made the mistake of doing this on my Chasm Fiend base, and it ended up eating away at the styrofoam. And so this time around, I had learned my lesson, and I primed it using a black paint. So I put the paint on with a brush. If you have an airbrush, that's great for you. You can use an airbrush for this. Once that dried, I went through and did a dry brush, a really heavy dry brush of basalt gray, or any kind of gray that you have on hand. Go around and get a good dry brush in there. Really heavy, because we don't want black stone, we want gray stone, but we do want the recesses to be black. And now I went back through and did a highlight dry brush, a lighter dry brush with white. So I used matte white from the Kickstarter paint set. And here you're trying to catch those really high raised areas to add contrast. Everything in miniature painting is adding contrast, exaggerating those details. So here I tried a few different shades. First I tried Nuln Oil, which is a black shade, and then I tried Drakenhof Blue, I think, and then I tried Strong Tone. I decided to stick with Strong Tone because I had it on hand. I actually ran out of Nuln Oil right before I started painting this, and so I stuck with Strong Tone. And then to get Kaladin on the base, all I had to do was snip off the pieces with my clippers, and then I stuck a part of a safety pin inside of his foot. I glued it in there, and I stuck it right into the top of the base. Made sure there was all kinds of glue to make sure that he did not fall off. At this stage, I thought I was done. I thought I would be done, but I realized that it was just literally a gray slab of rock, and I thought it was really boring. I wanted to add lightning scars on the rock because there would be a bunch of lightning forms inside of your Thiru, and I wanted to cast back in time of Rhythm of War to when it was invaded in the first place. I'm sure there was lots of lightning going on, and when Navani was trying to defend the tower, I decided to add that flare to the base because I thought that was a really cool part of the book. The invasion of Year 3 was awesome. After I did the black, I came through and toned down the black scars with some gray. And then I came back and touched up Kaladin's white glyph because I realized I missed the top portion of his glyph. So I came in, painted it white, and highlighted his sill spear with some white as well. And I decided that it still didn't have enough flair for my liking. So I came back through with some medium tan and dry brushed wherever I had put the baking soda. So remember that fine sand or that rocky ruins. I went in with medium tan and dry brushed those to look like inside of the stone, the sand of the stone and the rubble had come out of the pillar. One of the main lessons I learned is that I probably should have 3D printed the pillar itself, because in reality it just looks, it doesn't look like a pillar that would be inside of a city. But I wanted to try out styrofoam using it on a base, and I mean, it turned out all right. I'm really excited to see that it fit on the base. It kind of matched the aesthetic of the Celestant Prime that I wanted from Warhammer. And it's really cool to see Kaladin on a base that gives him that character that I really admire from the books.